I hope wherever you are, you're enjoying the lovely weather as much as I am. Where I'm at, spring is just right around the corner, and I'm getting so excited to get in my garden and get planting. My name is Nicole with Morning Chores. Today's video, I'm going to share my top gadget garden tools and products that I do not buy or use, and then I'm going to finish up with my top tried and true gadgets and tools that I use every year, all year long during the garden season. And thankfully with this list, it's very cheap, so you don't have to invest a lot of money to get started in gardening. So first, let's talk about my top garden gadgets and tools that I do not buy or use. Number one is garden gloves. Now, I do have garden gloves, and usually people gift them to me, but I do not use them in my regular gardening, which I know is not super great for your skin or your fingernails. My hands usually look perpetually dirty during the spring and summer months, and I have calluses, so my hands are not the prettiest of hands. But I just cannot work with garden gloves. It's harder for me to grab things, especially weeds. And I just like the feel of the dirt, which has actually been scientifically proven that there are components in the dirt that actually release serotonin in the brain. So it's similar to that of antidepressants. So, if you're feeling a little blue or a little down or unmotivated, just go play in the dirt. Like, I think our kids are onto something. We need to take advice from our kids and go play in the dirt. So I just like the feel of the dirt, and I just cannot really work as well in the dirt with garden gloves on. So the only time I have used them is if I have to pull a poison ivy plant. I'm extremely allergic to poison ivy, but then I usually use a rubber glove that I can just throw away because I don't even want to touch that glove or wash it or anything because I'm so allergic. So that's really the only time I use a garden glove. Number two on the list is commercial fertilizers. I do not buy commercial fertilizers from the store. Instead, I use natural things that I already have on my property. Things like leaf mulch from the woods. I've even gotten dirt from the woods. I use animal manure. We have chicken manure, and then we just started using rabbit manure. I actually like the rabbit manure a little better because you can put it directly on. You don't have to wait for it to decompose. The chicken manure, I have to wait years before I can actually put it on the garden. Unless the chickens are roaming in the garden, they just naturally defecate, then I can't really help that. But I found that one year I put chicken manure directly on the garden. I think it would only sat for 6 months, and it put all these weeds in my garden. So chicken manure, you have to let sit for a very long time, at least in my experience, before putting it on the garden. But the rabbit manure is, like I've been told, is gold to the garden, and this will be the first year that I'll see the benefits of that because we just started putting it on last fall. So I'm really excited to see that. Sometimes I will sprinkle eggshells and put that in the garden. We also have a wood stove, so in the wintertime I dump the ashes on the garden. So I find it just works better to use things that you kind of naturally have on your property. And if you don't have any of these things, you can always ask a neighbor, a friend. There's ways to find these things if you don't have them for yourself. The last thing I like to put on the garden is mulch. I like to mulch the garden using the Back to Eden garden method. I'll link a video where I talk more in detail about this in the description box below. But mulch, make sure it's untreated. Usually you can call your local tree service companies and see if they have mulch that they need to dump somewhere, but you can also buy it. We've had to buy it a couple of times, and I'll put that directly on the garden. And what I love about the mulch is that it eventually breaks down into soil, and you just have this rich black soil. So if you want something that lasts a little longer, because that usually lasts about 2 years, maybe 3, you can stretch it before you have to get more mulch. But that's something that helps retain moisture, and it also helps with weeding. It does a lot of benefits to the garden. Number 3 is a rototiller. I have never used a rototiller on my garden because I use the Back to Eden garden method, so you don't need a rototiller when you use this method of gardening. And again, if you want a tutorial on how to install a Back to Eden garden, that video is linked down below. Now, a couple years ago, I borrowed a rototiller from a family member because we had not mulched the garden in, I believe it was 3+ years. I think it was 3 years, and the weeds were so bad that I felt like I had to just start all over. So we had borrowed this rototiller, got it to our house, which was very difficult because we don't have a truck. So we had to borrow a vehicle, we had to get the rototiller here, and then we couldn't get it working. The tire went flat, and basically we just decided not to use it. So what my husband ended up doing is in the spring, the early spring, he went in and he just took a shovel and he flipped the dirt to expose all the roots of those weeds, and then we let them dry out for a couple of days, and then the kids and I went through and picked out as many roots of weeds that we possibly could get out, and that actually did a really awesome job on the garden. So I think it was better because my husband didn't disturb the microorganisms in the soil like a rototiller would have, and it got the job done what we needed, which was it helped us remove some of those roots out of the garden. So I'm actually going to have him do that again this year because it really did work really well. So thankfully, up to date, I have never had to use a rototiller on my garden. Number 4 is hand tools. And again, I have these. They're usually gifted to me, so I do keep them on hand. I just never use them. I usually dig the holes. If I have to dig a big hole, I'm using a big shovel. But if I have to dig a little hole, I just use my hands because the soil's workable enough and soft enough that I can do that. I've tried using the hand tools and I just think my hands work better than the hand tools. Another product that I don't use are plant markers. I have used them in the past and I just find they're more of a nuisance. And I find that not using plant markers, it forces me to learn what that plant looks like, which I know when they first come up, they kind of all look the same. But eventually they kind of grow into their own diverse look, and you learn what a tomato looks like and what a pepper looks like, and what a pumpkin looks like. Pumpkins and cucumbers can be kind of tricky sometimes when they intertwine with each other, but I don't use plant markers. And I know there's a lot of cute ones out there on Etsy, and you can even find some cute ones on Amazon, but I just find like all these little items are just added costs that you don't need to spend money on. Another product I don't spend money on is pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides. I really try hard not to use commercial chemicals on my garden spaces. I've tried some organic ones in the past. I had my tomato plants got hit with a blight, and I tried to use an organic, I think it was a fungicide, on my tomato plants, and it kind of slowed it down, but it really didn't stop it. So I don't use anything like that. If I'm going to use something, I'm going to use a natural product like vinegar, apple cider vinegar, lemon juice, even some hydrogen peroxide, stuff like that is a little bit more natural. And the last thing that I just don't buy for the garden is just like a lot of those little trendy things, like maybe a pad to kneel on or a little stool cart. There's all kinds of, like, if you go to the garden section in your hardware store, there's all kinds of just little doodads and things. I just don't buy any of that. I personally like a garden to look neat and clean, and I don't like it to look cluttery, so I don't like adding a lot of decor or anything like that. I mean, eventually, I don't know if you can see the garden down there, but we're planning on putting a white picket fence around the entire thing, and then I've got the arch that I'm planning to grow flowers up on. Like, that's it. That's all I want down there. I don't want a lot of things in the garden. I just want to grow the food and the flowers to make it pretty. So now that we've talked about the products that I don't buy or use, let's talk about my top tried and trues. Number 1 is a rake. The rake is probably the most used tool that I use in the garden. I use it every year, all year. I use it to prep the garden. I use it during the gardening season in between the rows to keep the soil loose, and then I use it for cleanup. And I love it because you can turn it on its side and make a row. You can rake leaves, you can rake dirt. It's just a really good tool to have, and this is something that I purchased a long time ago, and it's gotten lots of use, so it's definitely earned its place in my shed. The next item is a pitchfork. And what I love about my pitchfork is the handle is shorter, so it's easier for me to use because I'm very short. And the funny thing about this pitchfork is that we actually found it in our back field. My daughter and I were hiking in the back field, and I was like, what is this? I stepped on something, and there was a lot of overgrowth, so I had to move all that away, and here was this perfectly good pitchfork just laying in the back of our field. So it was a great find, and that's another thing that I use frequently. I use it to haul mulch, dirt, hay. It's just really handy. I use it to also clean out the chicken coop. It's a very handy tool to have, and I use it quite often. Of course, you can't garden without some kind of a shovel. Now, I know I mentioned earlier I don't use the small hand tools, but I do use a big shovel. I use it to make big holes. I use it to dig trenches. I use it to haul dirt. There's all kinds of uses for a shovel, and I think no matter what size your property is, you need a shovel because there's just so many uses for a shovel. The next thing I use is a covering, some kind of covering on your soil in your garden, and I again talked about this a little bit earlier in the video, and I have videos more on this in the description box below. But making sure that your soil is covered is huge. It's a game changer in the gardening business because when your soil is exposed to the elements, it will erode, it will blow away, it will become dry and crumbly and literally lifeless. And if you look on planet Earth, the soil is always covered. It's either covered by water, rocks, by leaves, trees, brush. The only time the soil is exposed, that's when erosion happens, and deserts, really. That's how deserts are formed, is because that soil has been exposed to the elements for long periods of time. So it's really important to keep your soil covered with something. I like to use the mulch. You can do plastic, you can do straw, you can do mulched leaves, something, because it's going to keep that soil loose and workable. It makes weeding easier, and you don't have to water as much. Like, I barely water my garden because the mulch keeps the soil moist. Also, we have our garden positioned so all the runoff from our gutters from our roof goes down that hill, so it's kind of a natural way to water the garden. So that's why we put it exactly in that spot. Also because it gets full sun, but it's the perfect spot for that. Another product that's really important that I use throughout the gardening season is, of course, your watering can and your garden hose. These are very, very important because you need to water your plants so that they can grow well and flourish and produce good for you. So I personally like the plastic ones a little better. I do have a couple metal ones, but I find the plastic ones actually last longer. My metal ones usually develop a leak somewhere. One of the seams becomes weak and it leaks. So I find just these cheapy plastic ones actually work the best. And the last product that I use every single year are tomato cages and fencing for things like green beans, peas, tomatoes, obviously, but these I just find work the best. They are a little bit of investment up front, but what I like about them, especially the square ones, I like the square cages because they're bigger, they fold flat, so they're easy for storage. Literally all you do is put it over the plant, and then, you know, every couple of weeks you just have to help the leaves kind of poke out in the right places on the cage, but that is it. It's just super low maintenance. I've tried other methods for keeping my tomato plants up, you know, and off of the ground. I've tried tying them and staking them, and these I just think require so much more maintenance, whereas the cages, it's just kind of a one and done. So I definitely think that's one item that's worth the upfront cost. I hope you enjoyed today's video and found it helpful. I just mainly wanted to encourage you that, especially if you're new to gardening, you do not have to invest a lot of money in products in order to get started. Of course, putting in a garden takes time and it takes a lot of muscle, but if you have those two things, all you really need is a shovel and a rake and some covering, and the rest is just extra fluff, and you can always purchase those things later and as you go. So I'm excited to get into the garden, and I hope you guys are too, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on the next video.